It's our pleasure to welcome our speakers and panelists. First, we welcome Laverdis Davis, MD, Physician Medical Officer, Division of Non-Prescription Drugs 2, Office of Non-Prescription Drugs, Office of New Drugs, CDER, FDA, and joining us on our Q&A panel, Commander Danielle Terrell, Associate Director for Strategic Initiatives, Office of Non-Prescription Drugs, Office of New Drugs, CDER, FDA. Please join me to welcome Dr. Davis.
Thank you for that introduction. Good afternoon, welcome, and thank you for attending today's webinar. As mentioned, my name is Laverdis Davis. I am a physician clinical reviewer in the Division of Non-Prescription Drug Products 2 in the Office of Non-Prescription Drugs. Today, I will discuss the over-the-counter monograph order requests, format and content, and providing over-the-counter monograph submissions in electronic format guidances. The learning objectives for this webinar are to provide an overview of the two draft guidances, over-the-counter monograph order requests, format and content draft guidance, and providing over-the-counter monograph submissions in electronic format draft guidance. Specifically, I will discuss FDA's recommendations on the format and content of the information that requesters should provide in an OTC Monograph Order Request, or OMOR. Discuss the information that FDA may recommend for a sufficiently complete OMOR. Describe examples of OTC monograph submissions that must be in electronic format. Discuss FDA's recommendations and other information on how to send OTC monograph submissions to FDA in electronic format. On March 27, 2020, the President signed into law the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or the CARES Act. The CARES Act amended the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to reform the regulation of OTC monograph drugs. Of specific importance and for discussion today, the CARES Act adds Section 505G to the FD&C Act, which reforms and modernizes the way OTC monograph drugs are regulated in the United States by replacing the old rulemaking process with a less time-consuming, less burdensome administrative order process for establishing, revising, and amending OTC monographs. In addition, the CARES Act adds Section 744M, granting the agency the authority to assess and collect fees from regulated industry for OTC monograph drug activities from October 2020 through September 2025. These fees provide additional resources which will support OTC monograph drug activities, ultimately providing the public with access to innovative OTC monograph drugs. For simplicity, we will refer to the regulatory framework under the CARES Act as OTC monograph reform, and we refer to the user fee program as OMOFA. Congress's authorization of OTC monograph reform in the CARES Act was informed by an FDA industry agreement embodied in an over-the-counter monograph user fees program performance goals and procedures document, under which FDA agreed to adhere to certain timelines and performance goals related to hiring, training, and the development of an IT platform, timelines related to the review of OTC monograph order requests, or OMORs, and timelines related to meeting requests, just to name a few. First and foremost, OTC monograph reform changed the process for revising, issuing, amending, and finalizing OTC monographs from the three-phase public notice and comment rulemaking process to a new administrative order process. The administrative order process still involves public comment. OTC Monograph reform gives FDA the authority to issue administrative orders that add, remove, or change grace conditions for an OTC drug monograph. It establishes an expedited process to more rapidly address urgent safety issues. And the administrative order process can be initiated by either industry or by FDA. First of all, what is an OMOR? In an industry-initiated order process, a requester submits a request that FDA issue an administrative order determining whether a drug is generally recognized as safe and effective, or GRACE, or determining whether a change to a condition of use of a drug is GRACE. This request is called an over-the-counter monograph order request, or OMOR. For industry-initiated orders, the process begins with the requester electronically submitting an OTC monograph order request, or OMOR, to FDA. FDA will determine if the application is sufficiently complete for review and file, or refuse to file the OMOR. If FDA accepts the OMOR for filing, FDA will review the OMOR and issue a proposed order. The public will have at least 45 calendar days to submit comments on the proposed order. After reviewing and considering the comments, FDA will issue a final order. Time frames for industry-initiated orders are laid out in the OMUFA goals document based on the type of order requested and the volume and substantiveness of public comments. For FDA-initiated orders, the process begins with FDA issuing a proposed order or interim final order under expedited procedure and continues in a similar manner as for an industry-initiated order, with a public comment period followed by a final order. For both FDA-initiated and industry-initiated orders, there will be an opportunity for comment, and if applicable, for dispute resolution, an administrative hearing, and judicial review. There are two types of OMORs, Tier 1 and Tier 2, which differ in scope and in their associated fees and timelines. In brief, Tier 2 OMORs include a very specific list of limited changes that are specified in the Over-the-Counter Monograph User Fee Program Performance Goals and Procedures document and defined under the user fee provision of the Act. Tier 1 OMORs, which are expected to constitute the majority of order requests, include any request that is not determined to be a Tier 2 OMOR. Those previous slides provided a brief introduction to monograph reform. I will now talk about two guidances that were commitments under the goals document, starting with the OTC Monograph Order Requests, Format and Content Draft Guidance. This guidance is intended to assist requesters in preparing OMORs for submission to FDA under Section 505G of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. It provides FDA's recommendations on the format and content of the information that requesters should provide in an OMOR and identifies other relevant guidance documents to assist requesters in preparing their OMORs. Now that we know what OMOR means, let's talk about some additional important aspects of an OMOR. First, an OMOR must be submitted in electronic format. Later in this webinar, I will discuss how a requester should electronically submit an OMOR. Second, An OMOR must be submitted to FDA in the form and manner specified by the agency. This guidance specifies the form and manner an OMOR should be submitted to FDA. Third, an OMOR must be sufficiently complete and formatted to permit FDA to conduct a substantive review. Simply put, an OMOR must contain adequate information for FDA to make a grace determination. This guidance provides an overview of the information that FDA may recommend for a sufficiently complete OMOR. This guidance is not intended to indicate the studies and related information that a requester must submit in a specific OMOR. Requesters can request a formal meeting with FDA to discuss specific data, studies, and related information to be submitted in the OMORs. For procedures and principles for formal meetings between FDA and sponsors or requesters for an OTC monograph drug, see the draft guidance for industry formal meetings between FDA and sponsors or requesters of the over-the-counter monograph drugs. The draft guidance is divided into several sections that discuss the format and content recommendations for an OMOR, followed by general considerations, information about an environmental assessment for an OMOR, and then how FDA will manage confidential information submitted in an OMOR. OMORs should follow the organizational structure and format outlined in the Common Technical Document for the Registration of Pharmaceuticals for Human Use, or CTD. The CTD organizes quality, safety, and efficacy information into a common format. An OMOR should be organized into 5 modules as follows. Module 1, Administrative Information. Module 2, Summaries. Module 3, Quality Data. Module 4, Non-Clinical Study Reports. Module 5, Clinical Study Reports. Refer to guidance documents that FDA issued specific to CTD for organizing certain applications that will be submitted to FDA. The recommendations provided in these guidance documents are also applicable to OMORs. Although, in general, requesters should follow the recommendations provided in previously issued CTD guidance documents, this guidance highlights additional format and content recommendations specific to an OMOR. An OMOR may not need to include all the information identified for an applicable module, section, or subsection described in this guidance. In those circumstances, a requester should indicate that no information is being submitted for a given module or a section or subsection of a module. Module 1, entitled Administrative Information, should contain 6 sections in the following order: Table of Contents, Cover Letter, Administrative Information, References, Meetings, Labeling. This table is not intended to be an exhaustive list of what should be included in Module 1. This table provides some examples of information to include in each section of Module 1. For example, Module 1 should include a comprehensive table of contents for the entire submission. The cover letter should include pertinent information that aids communication regarding the review of the OMOR. The guidance specifies the minimum information that should be included in the cover letter. Module 1 should include administrative information, including a statement that all information considered by the requester to be confidential has been identified in the OMOR, an environmental assessment, and a statement of claimed exclusivity. If applicable, Module 1 should include letters of authorization, a statement of right of reference, or previously submitted information to FDA. Requesters should include a listing of all meetings that the requester had with FDA regarding this OMOR, including complete copies of meeting materials and correspondence pertaining to the OMOR. And finally, Module 1 should include examples of proposed labeling that reflect the OTC Monograph condition or conditions of use proposed in the OMOR. Now I will discuss Module 2, which contains the summaries. Module 2 summarizes the information that will be provided in the quality, non-clinical, and clinical modules of the OMOR. Summary should contain 7 sections in the following order: 2.1 Table of Contents, 2.2 Introduction to Summary Documents, 2.3 Quality Overall Summary, 2.4 Non-Clinical Overview, 2.5 Clinical Overview, 2.6 Non-Clinical Written and Tabulated Summaries, 2.7 Clinical Summary. The comprehensive table of contents should list all the documents provided in the OMOR for modules 2 through 5. The introduction section to the summary documents should provide a concise narrative summary of 1. The positive safety and effectiveness data supporting a determination that a specific drug, class of drugs, or combination of drugs with a proposed active ingredient or other condition of use is GRACE for the intended non-prescription use, and 2. The negative safety and effectiveness data that are not supportive of a determination that the specific drug, class of drugs, or combination of drugs, or other condition of use is GRACE. The quality overall summary section should provide a summary of all chemistry and manufacturing data included in the submission. It should not include information, data, or justification that was not included in Module 3. For content and format recommendations for the quality overall summary section for an OMOR, requesters should refer to the ICH Guidance for Industry, M4Q, the CTD quality. The non-clinical overview section should present an integrated and critical assessment of the pharmacologic, pharmacokinetic, and toxicologic evaluation of the active ingredient or other conditions of use. For content and structural format recommendations for the non-clinical overview section for an OMOR, requesters should refer to the ICH Guidance for Industry, M4S, the CTD safety. The clinical overview section should present an integrated and critical assessment of all the clinical data included in the OMOR. The clinical overview section should provide the rationale for the OTC Monograph drug development program and a succinct discussion and interpretation of the clinical findings together with any other relevant information necessary to present the conclusions and implications of the data. For content and format recommendations for the clinical overview section for an OMOR, requesters should refer to the ICH Guidance for Industry, M4ER2, the CTD efficacy. The non-clinical written summaries should include a narrative summary of all the non-clinical data included in the submission. For recommendations on the content for each non-clinical written summary, requesters should refer to the ICH Guidance for Industry, M4S, the CTD safety. Requesters should modify the format if needed to provide the best possible presentation of the information and to facilitate the understanding and evaluation of the results. Additionally, the summary tables for the non-clinical information submitted in an OMOR should be provided in the format outlined in the ICH Guidance for Industry, M4S, the CTD safety. For the recommended formats for the tables in the non-clinical tabulated summaries, requesters should refer to Appendices B and C in the ICH Guidance for Industry M4S, the CTD Safety Appendices. However, requesters should modify the format, if warranted, to provide the best possible presentation of the information and to facilitate the understanding and evaluation of the results. The clinical summary section should provide a detailed, factual summary of all the clinical information in the OMOR. For recommendations on the content and format for each subsection in the clinical summary section, requesters should refer to the ICH Guidance for Industry M4ER2, the CTD Efficacy. Module 3 should discuss the chemistry, manufacturing, and controls reports for both drug substance and drug product. For recommendations on content to include in Module 3 of the OMOR, requesters should refer to the ICH Guidance for Industry, M4Q, the CTD Quality. Module 3 should be organized according to the following general section outline. 3.1, Module 3, Table of Contents. 3.2, Body of Data. 3.3, Literature References. For recommendations on the format of information in Module 3 and its organizational placement within the module, requesters should refer to the ICH Guidances for Industry, M4Q, the CTD Quality, and M4, the CTD Quality Questions and Answers, Location, Issues. Let's move on to Module 4. Module 4 should include data and reports from the non-clinical studies. The non-clinical studies that may be necessary to support an OMOR include pharmacology studies, general toxicity studies, toxicokinetic and non-clinical pharmacokinetic studies, reproduction toxicity studies, genotoxicity studies, and an assessment of carcinogenic potential. Requesters should conduct other non-clinical studies to assess phototoxicity, immunotoxicity, juvenile animal toxicity, and abuse liability on a case-by-case basis. For recommendations on the types of non-clinical safety studies that should be conducted to support an OMOR and their relation to the conduct of human clinical trials, requesters should refer to the ICH Guidance for Industry, M3R2, Non-Clinical Safety Studies for the Conduct of Human Clinical Trials and Marketing Authorization for Pharmaceuticals. Module 4 should be organized according to the following general section outline. 4.1, Module 4, Table of Contents. 4.2, Study Reports. 4.3, Literature References. For recommendations on the structural format and organization of non-clinical study reports in an OMOR, requesters should refer to the ICH Guidance for Industry, M4S, the CTD Safety. Module 5 in the OMOR should include full reports of all clinical effectiveness and safety studies and other clinical data, all clinical pharmacology and human toxicokinetic data, all consumer behavior studies, and post-marketing experience. In addition to actual study reports, the requesters should include all other types of clinical data, for example, from literature searches, scientific articles, other published materials, in this module. For recommendations on the types of clinical studies and related information that can be included in Module 5 of an OMOR, requesters should refer to the ICH Guidance for Industry, M4ER2, the CTD Efficacy. For additional guidance on the structure and content of clinical study reports, requesters should refer to the ICH Guidance for Industry, E3, Structure and Content of Clinical Study Reports. While not all consumer behavior studies are clinical studies, full reports of all consumer behavior studies should be included in Module 5. Consumer behavior studies include label comprehension studies, self-selection studies, actual use studies, and human factors studies. Consumer behavior studies can help demonstrate that the requirement for adequate directions for use is met. As you can see on the slide, there are 4 different consumer behavioral studies for non-prescription drugs. They include label comprehension, self-selection, actual use, and human factors. The label comprehension study tests consumers' understanding of the key label message. The self-selection study tests whether a consumer can correctly choose whether the product is right for them in their unique medical situation. The actual use study tests whether a consumer can use the product according to labeled directions. And finally, the human factors study tests how a consumer interacts with the product, especially for a drug-device combination product. In the circumstance where a requester is proposing that a new active ingredient is GRACE, Module 5 must include information demonstrating prima facie safe non-prescription marketing and use for that active ingredient for the particular therapeutic use, specified in Section 505G, A1, A2, or A3 of the FD&C Act, subject to a final order under Section 505G(b) of the FD&C Act, or subject to a final sunscreen order. When applicable, Module 5 must include information demonstrating prima facie safe non-prescription marketing and use, including the following, as applicable. 1. Information demonstrating that the drug has a history of being marketed and safely used by consumers in the United States as a non-prescription drug under comparable conditions of use must be included. Or 2. If the drug has not been previously marketed in the United States as a non-prescription drug, the requester must include information sufficient for a prima facie demonstration that the drug was marketed and safely used under comparable conditions of marketing and use in a country listed in Section 802B1A of the FD&C Act, or designated by FDA in accordance with Section 802B1B of the FD&C Act. The time period of marketing and use must provide reasonable assurances concerning the safe non-prescription use of the drug. Additionally, the requester must provide evidence that during the time period of non-prescription use, the drug was subject to sufficient monitoring by a regulatory body considered acceptable by FDA for such monitoring, including for adverse events associated with non-prescription use of the drug. Or 3. If FDA determines that information described in 1 or 2 above is not needed to provide a prima facie demonstration that the drug can be safely marketed and used as a non-prescription drug, the requester must submit other information FDA determines is sufficient for such purposes. If the OMOR fails to include such information demonstrating prima facie safe non-prescription marketing and use, FDA will refuse to file the OMOR and require that the non-prescription marketing of the drug be pursuant to an approved application under Section 505 of the FD&C Act. For drug products or active ingredients that are currently marketed, Module 5 should include reports that summarize the marketing experience relevant to the OTC Monograph condition of use proposed in the OMOR, including detailed information for relevant safety observations. The reports of post-marketing experience should include discussions and analyses of the post-marketing data, along with the conclusions and implications of the data as it pertains to the OTC Monograph condition of use proposed in the OMOR. The reports should also include any relevant safety discussions and analyses from the literature, if available. Module 5 should include all relevant post-marketing data available to the requester, published and unpublished, including periodic safety update reports, if available. Module 5 should be organized according to the following general section outline. 5.1, Module 5 Table of Contents. 5.2, Tabular Listing of all clinical studies. 5.3, Clinical Study Reports. 5.4, Literature References. For recommendations on the specific organization and placement of clinical study reports and related information in Module 5, requesters should refer to the ICH Guidance for Industry, M4ER2, the CTD Efficacy. The following are some general considerations that requesters should keep in mind when developing an OMOR submission. The OMOR should be in the English language. Font size for text and tables should be a style and size that is large enough to be easily legible, even after photocopying or when provided electronically. We recommend that narrative text be submitted in Times New Roman 12-point font. Generally, the requester should format an OMOR to standard U.S. letter size paper, which is 8.5 by 11.578 inches. In general, all documents should have page numbers. Page numbering should be at the document level and not the module level. The entire OMOR submission should be electronically searchable. An OMOR should not contain non-searchable text. All items in reference lists and all in-text references citing scientific articles or other published materials should include a hyperlink to a full copy of the referenced article or other referenced published material. The National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, or NEPA, requires all federal agencies to assess the environmental impacts of their actions and to ensure that the interested and affected public is informed of environmental analyses. FDA complies with NEPA by considering impacts of agency actions, such as decisions on applications or petitions, as part of its regulatory process. FDA's regulations in 21 CFR Part 25 specify that environmental assessments, or EAs, must be submitted as part of applications or petitions that request FDA action, unless the action qualifies for categorical exclusion. Because an OMOR is a request for agency action, like an application or petition, the requester must accompany such a request with either an EA or a claim of categorical exclusion. For general recommendations on how to prepare an EA, refer to the following guidances for industry, including Environmental Assessment of Human Drug and Biologics Applications, and Environmental Assessment, Questions and Answers Regarding Drugs with Estrogenic, Androgenic, or Thyroid Activity. For further information, see regulations promulgated by the Council of Environmental Quality at 40 CFR Part 1500. Now I will discuss confidential information as it pertains to an OMOR. In general, the OTC Monograph order process is a public process. Section 505G(d) of the FD&C Act limits the information that can be confidentially submitted to FDA in connection with proceedings on an order. In general, until disclosure is triggered under Section 505G(d)(2) of the FD&C Act, any information on the drug or drugs involved that is submitted by a requester in connection with proceedings on an order will not be disclosed to the public unless the requester consents to that disclosure. However, FDA must make any information submitted by a requester in support of an OMOR available to the public not later than the date on which the proposed order is issued. The information in an OMOR will remain confidential if 1. It pertains to pharmaceutical quality information. 2. It is of the type contained in raw data sets. 3. It is submitted in a requester-initiated request, but the requester withdraws the request before FDA issues the proposed order, or FDA requests and obtains the information under Section 505G(c) of the FD&C Act, and the information is not submitted in relation to an order under Section 505Gb of the FD&C Act. Next, I'll talk about the Electronic Submissions Guidance. This guidance provides information on providing electronic submissions to FDA under Section 505G of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. This guidance is intended to assist submitters by describing the electronic OTC Monograph submissions requirement in Section 505GJ of the FD&C Act and providing recommendations and other information on how to send such OTC monograph submissions to FDA in electronic format. Section 505GJ of the FD&C Act requires that all OTC monograph submissions must be in electronic format. Examples of OTC monograph submissions include, but are not limited to, the following: OTC monograph order requests, or OMORs, public comments to a proposed administrative or interim final administrative order, formal meeting requests and meeting packages, formal dispute resolution requests related to a final administrative order, administrative hearing requests related to a final administrative order, responses to record requests by FDA relating to minor changes, updates to drug listing information for the drug in accordance with Section 510J of the FD&C Act when a change is made to a drug subject to Section 505G. So where should OTC monograph submissions be submitted? Well, that depends on the type of submission. Depending on the type of submission, OTC monograph submissions may be submitted to FDA through the following: CDER NextGen portal, OTC monographs at FDA, or Electronic Drug Registration and Listing System, or EDRLS. I will provide an overview of these three systems. In October 2022, FDA announced the expansion of the CDER NextGen portal to enable certain electronic OTC monograph submissions to FDA under Section 505G of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. CDER NextGen portal is a website for users to report information to the FDA. Submitters must have an account to submit OTC monograph submissions in the CDER NextGen portal. For information on how to set up an account and other related questions, visit CDER NextGen portal website and click on the Frequently Asked Questions link. Currently, sponsors and requesters of OTC monograph drugs are able to use the CDER NextGen portal to submit requests for formal meetings with FDA and materials related to the formal meetings. In the future, sponsors and requesters will be able to submit other OTC monograph submissions via the CDER NextGen portal, including OMORs, formal dispute resolution requests related to a final administrative order, administrative hearing requests related to a final administrative order, and responses to record requests by FDA related to minor changes. Submitters need to have a CDER NextGen portal account to submit OTC Monograph submissions in electronic format through the CDER NextGen portal. For information on how to set up an account and other related questions, visit the CDER NextGen portal website and click the Frequently Asked Questions link. CDER's NextGen portal provides for the secure submission of OTC Monograph submissions. CDER NextGen portal does not provide a means to edit OTC Monograph submissions once they have been submitted. For information related to file size limitations for OTC Monograph submissions, contact CDER at edmsupport@fda.hhs.gov. The receipt date for an OTC Monograph submission is the date on which the request is deemed to have arrived at FDA. The receipt date should not be confused with the date of FDA's subsequent decision to file a request. The receipt date for an electronic OTC Monograph submission is determined only after the files in the submission have been validated in CDER NextGen portal. After an OTC Monograph submission has been successfully submitted, a confirmation will appear in the portal. Submitters will also receive an email notification from the portal confirming the submission is successful and establishing the submission's receipt date. We created a public web-based portal called OTC Monographs at FDA. It provides a resource for the public to view administrative orders, which includes proposed final and interim final orders for OTC monograph drugs and OTC monographs. This portal also facilitates the submission of comments and data from the public for proposed and interim final administrative orders. OTC Monographs at FDA functions as a comprehensive resource for OTC monograph information. In addition to viewing OTC monographs and administrative orders, the public will also have access to other OTC monograph information, including a latest news ticker, an annual forecast, and other OTC monograph resources such as frequently asked questions, past presentations, relevant guidance documents, and more. Data, information, and public comments to a proposed order or interim final order should be electronically submitted as specified by instructions in the OTC Monographs at FDA portal. Instructions on how to submit data and information submissions will be found in the FDA data requests posted in the OTC Monographs at FDA portal. Instructions on how to submit public comments to a proposed order or interim final order are contained in the proposed order or interim final order posted in the OTC Monographs at FDA portal, including how to submit public comments that include confidential information. Submissions related to updating drug listing information should be electronically submitted, consistent with the electronic drug registration and listing system process and instructions. Instructions can be found on FDA's electronic drug registration and listing system webpage. So now, a few challenge questions. Challenge question number 1. Which of the following is an example of an OTC monograph submission that must be in electronic format? Is it A, OTC monograph order requests, or OMORs? B, public comments to a proposed administrative order or interim final administrative order? C, formal meeting requests and meeting packages? Or D, all of the above? The answer is D, all of the above. And here's challenge question number 2. Which of the following statements is not true? Is it A, every OMOR must include all the information identified for each module, section, or subsection described in the OMOR format and content draft guidance and other CTD guidance documents? B, an OMOR should follow the CTD format. C, FDA can refuse to file an OMOR that is not sufficiently complete and formatted to permit substantive review. D, an OMOR should be submitted electronically through the CDER NextGen portal. The answer is A. Every OMOR must include all the information identified for each module, section, or subsection described in the OMOR format and content draft guidance and other CTD guidance documents. On this slide, I've provided some resources on over-the-counter monograph order requests, format and content draft guidance, providing over-the-counter monograph submissions in electronic format draft guidance, CTD guidance documents, formal meetings between FDA and sponsors or requesters of over-the-counter monograph drugs draft guidance, CDER NextGen portal, OTC Monographs at FDA portal, and FDA's Electronic Drug Registration and Listing System, or EDRLS. For general questions on OTC monograph drugs, email druginfo@fda.hhs.gov. For questions on CDER NextGen portal, email edmsupport@fda.hhs.gov. For questions regarding AMUFA user fees, email cedarcollections@fda.hhs.gov. For questions regarding small business and industry assistance, email cedarsbia@fda.hhs.gov. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention today and for attending this webinar.
Thank you for the great presentation. We'll now transition into our Q&A session. If you haven't had a chance to enter your questions in the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. Looks like we have some questions coming in right now. The first question is directed to Dr. Davis. And here's the question for Dr. Davis. Who can submit an OMOR?
That is an excellent question. So Section 505G of the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act permits FDA to issue an administrative order at the request of a requester. In Section 505G, the term requester refers to any person or group or persons marketing, manufacturing, processing, or developing a drug. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've had a few more questions coming in, and the next question will be directed to Commander Terrell. And here is the question. Is FDA currently accepting and reviewing OMORs?
Thank you for the question. So FDA is accepting OMORs. However, while a requester may submit an OMOR, there are currently no timelines or performance goals associated with the review of an OMOR. If resources permit, FDA intends to review these early OMOR submissions in order of receipt, but the timelines and the performance goals will not apply. If an requester is nearing completion of a development program for an OMOR, FDA encourages the requester to meet with us to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have another question just came in for Commander Terrell. And here is the question. How fast will a final decision on an OMOR submission be made?
Thank you. So, final administrative orders for Tier 1 OMORs will be issued within 17.5 months after receipt of the submitted OMOR. Final administrative orders for Tier 2 OMORs will be issued within 15.5 months. The timelines to issue the final administrative orders may be extended for both the Tier 1 and two-tier OMORs if public comments are numerous or substantive, or if the requester submits major amendments to the OMOR. But please remember that the timelines and the performance goals for OMOR review do not begin until 2024. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a few more questions that came in for Dr. Davis. And here is the next question. How does a requester submit an OMOR?
Thank you for that question. So, in the near future, requesters will be able to submit other OTC monograph submissions via the CDER NextGen portal, including OMORs. If a requester would like to submit an OMOR before the CDER NextGen portal can accept OMOR submissions, I recommend you contact FDA for guidance. FDA intends to post an alert on our latest news ticker at OTC Monographs at FDA when CDER NextGen portal is available to accept OMOR submissions. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got just over 1 minute left. We're going to try to squeeze in one more question, and this is directed to Dr. Davis. And here's the question. Can other researchers' studies be used as supportive data for submission of an OMOR?
That's a great question. So, in certain situations, studies that are not conducted by the requester of the OMOR may be used as to support an OMOR. If a requester provides reference to a third party's NDA, ANDA, BLA, or drug master file, the requester should include letter or letters of authorization by the owner or owners of the information, giving authorization for the information to be used by the requester in connection with the OMOR, and statements of rights of reference indicating the NDA, ANDA, BLA, or drug master file to which the requester has a right of reference, and identify the section or sections of the OMOR for which the letters of authorization is relevant. Additionally, a requester may include literature searches, scientific articles, other published materials in support of an OMOR. Thank you.
That's all the time we have for questions. A huge thank you to our presenter and the panelists for answering numerous questions that came in today.